And now I'm pleased to welcome Señora Patricia Arévalo, the Director of FONDO EDITORIAL, Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú. Please welcome her. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to be here again in this wonderful city and this beautiful building. Thanks to the American Society and Susan Segal, to the Reed Foundation and Jane Gregory Rubin, and to Raquel Chang-Rodriguez, editor of the book that we are presenting tonight. The University Press of the Pontificia Universidad Católica del Perú is really honored to be able to publish a book as important as Entre la espada y la pluma, el Inca Garcilaso de la Vega y sus comentarios reales, and to do it with the collaboration of the American Society and the City University of New York, institutions that last year hosted the interdisciplinary symposium that produced the works that make up this book. The event, as you already know, was prepared to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the first publication of Los Comentarios Reales in 1609, and was promoted and organized by Raquel Chang-Rodriguez, editor of the book, who, with her usual drive and enthusiasm, made it turn out as everything she does very successfully. And I can say this because this has not been the first time I've worked with Raquel, so I've been able to see and admire her job and her energy in several occasions. Some time ago, I believe like 4 years ago, we presented a previous book on Garcilaso's La Florida del Inca in this very same room. The interdisciplinary symposium, which gave origin to this book, was planned with a lot of anticipation, enough to get the volume published not very long after the event took place almost a year ago, which is not that common. I don't know about how it is in the United States, but in Peru, usually it takes a lot more time to have a volume like this one published. Raquel's job did not end after the symposium took place. She had to reserve a lot of energy in order to coordinate that every author sent their essays on time and with the proper formats and editorial requirements, and at the same time to coordinate with us in Peru all the details an academic publication requires. As she likes to say, the devil is in the details. And certainly she's very conscious of every detail, so probably the devil is not around and has not been around with this book. So I hope. The result has been, I believe, very good, thanks to Raquel's care, her perception and trained eye as an editor, and her ability to join the best specialists in Garcilaso de la Vega around the world. The book, about which I won't speak, since we have great lecturers here tonight, counts with the collaboration of very important specialists in Garcilaso's work, authors from different nationalities, including certainly several Peruvian academics, represented here by Mario Vargas Llosa. It is an honor and a very happy occasion to be once again with my dear and admired author, with whom I've been lucky enough to share many times before, and of course with Raquel Chang-Rodriguez and Frank Graziano, who will follow me. Thank you very much.
And now I'd like to welcome Professor Frank Graziano from Connecticut College, the John D. MacArthur Director, and Chair of Hispanic Studies.
I'm presuming that Patricia doesn't have any social diseases because I need to drink some of this water. I always wish that scholarship could be as moving as music. It never is, but that's sort of the goal. Thanks so much to the American Society, especially to Raquel and to all of you. Raquel asked me to speak for 15 minutes, so I prepared a written presentation that I'll read, and I'm in the unfortunate position of not being able to see you if I take off my glasses to read the presentation, but if I don't take off my glasses, I can't read the presentation. So I'll see you after the presentation. Perhaps you've had the experience of being abroad for some months and then coming home to what you love. A wine that you missed, some kind of food, a kiss, a piece of music. When you return and taste the wine or hear the music for the first time, it has an exquisite quality that you can't believe, a sensuousness, an intensity of rediscovery. You promise yourself that you'll retain this enhanced sense of appreciation, that all of your experience will be imbued with this beauty, but eventually the intensity dissipates into routine and you hold on to whatever you can. I mention this because over the last years I've wandered from my literary past in my studies of colonial Peru. Lately I've been reading almost exclusively in the social sciences for a book in progress on migration. Social science scholarship, if you haven't had the pleasure, is unbearably wooden, with dead prose conveying an empiricism that hardly carries an insight. Coming home from those readings to this book that we're celebrating tonight was consequently for me a kind of revelation, a reintroduction to the strengths and finesse of the humanities. My sensibilities were perhaps heightened by absence, but anyone who reads the book will be impressed by the elegance of the prose, the precision of expression, the nuance of thought, the insightful associations, and the perceptive analysis of detail. There is also thematic resonance, and in the few minutes that I have with you tonight, I would like to comment most briefly on some of the recurring themes. Inca Garcilaso described himself as an enemy of fiction, in part because he measured his history against books of knight-errantry, but also because his Incan youth provided him an insider truth whose veracity was never challenged. Along the continuum between fiction and history, he pushed the fictive pole to the outer limits and situated his endeavor closer to historical accuracy. Quote, "I have fuller and more accurate information than that provided by previous writers," he states in a preface to Comentarios Reales, but the work is nevertheless a compromise between historical data and literary imagination, between a faithful memory and the years, acculturation, and mythopoetic recollection that conspire against it. Nostalgia also exerts its influence on memory, most notably in idealizations that soften the edges of hard truths and that invest the past with meanings amenable to one's condition. Inca Garcilaso wrote, as he put it, "Impelled by my natural love for my native country, but love alters perceptions, and lost love magnifies distortions." Nostalgia also contributed to the earnest, humble, melancholic, and at once assertive tone that makes his work so complex and appealing. These tonal attributes were informed by despair after the Royal Council of Indies rejected Inca Garcilaso's petitions. He was forced, as he put it, to retire from the world and to conceal myself in the haven and shelter of the disillusioned, which are corners of solitude and poverty. His doubled exile, once from Peru and again within Spain, was far from defeatist, however, because it induced a reactive self-assertion, a textual reclamation of dignity. In Comentarios Reales, there is also a split allegiance between narration and poetic detail on the one hand and historical parameters on the other. The passage with the seabirds diving for fish is a great example. It evidences Inca Garcilaso's preference for inclusive history that goes beyond economies and armies to integrate imagery that, however ahistorical, claims historical validity. The diving fish passage and others like it establish a sense of place, but beyond that, they integrate poetic narration into history as a means of perception and cognition, a way of seeing and interpreting an historical ambiance. Seemingly inconsequential details, such as natives walking behind one another like cranes, also carry figurative meanings. I feel like we're bound forever together. Displacement, too, is thematically significant. Something happened in the distance between Cusco and Montilla. Movement is fundamental. Essays in the book we're celebrating pursue the ideological journeys inherent in travel, the movement of books between Spain and the colonies, the itinerary of Inca Garcilaso himself, the idea of history as a Christian progression detoured through Tawantinsuyo, and the transpositions and distortions of translation. In the background of all of these movements is an armchair journey to a paradise not so much lost as under construction, both by colonization and by historical elaboration that anticipates a happy ending. Stylistic displacements are also characteristic. The focus often shifts from history to imagery, from chronicling event to representing it poetically or giving primacy to the demands of narration. The passage concerning Tupac Amaru's execution focuses not on the beheading, but rather on a detail prior to the beheading. Inca Garcilaso zooms in on Tupac Amaru's hand as it rises to the ear and then descends slowly to ask the crowd for silence. The passage carries two implicit combative meanings, both of which are latent in the image and conveyed by displacement of focus. In the first meaning, the impotence of the condemned Inca yields to representation of his absolute authority when thousands of natives go silent at his request. By focusing on this moment rather than on the cutlass coming down on the neck, Inca Garcilaso elicits sympathy and admiration for the victim, who is himself a metonymy of the conquered Andeans as a whole. Other passages likewise convey a subtle, emergent sentiment of nativism or anti-colonialism. Inca Garcilaso thus strategically uses his dominant culture advantages for a protest, however subdued, against indigenous abuse and subordination. A second meaning inherent in the same image, however, aligns with a more sustained discourse that understates the horror of conquest and tends to exonerate its protagonists. While the focus is on a detail, Tupac Amaru's execution itself is recorded only with a brief sentence, thereby minimizing its relevance. Elsewhere, the conquerors are glorified within the cosmovision of imperial Spain. They are immortal heroes with prowess and bravery. They are immortal heroes whose prowess and bravery won the richly endowed New World, as Inca Garcilaso put it, for God, for the king, and for themselves. The contradiction inherent in the Tupac Amaru example epitomizes the embattled identity of Inca Garcilaso. It is almost as though the two parts of his classic work were divided along the lines of his genetic composition. At the same time, however, the incompatibilities of conqueror and conquered engage dialectically to bang out the mestizo compromise that defines this voice. There is an internal contradiction, a living paradox, a troubled coexistence analogous to the internal dynamics of a metaphor as the tenor and the vehicle battle out their differences to generate poetic tension. Exiles never go home to experience with renewed intensity the love things that they left behind. They compensate by recentering, by negotiating a peace between the past and the present, and by repairing to a hybrid ideal born of pride and of longing. Thank you.